What is going on, everybody? Welcome in to the reveal of the number 30 team in my 2022 NFL Power Rankings. And in this video, we're going to be taking a deep dive into the Chicago Bears, a team very much in transition here. Even though their head coach is still named Matt and their general manager is still named Ryan, it is Nagy out and Eberflus in. It is Pace out and Poles in. But this is a team in a new regime trying to figure out who the young core players of this new regime are going to be. And as they do that, they're going to be getting cheaper and younger on this roster, opening up cap space for future seasons to really improve here. And all in the while, they're hoping to see some development from their exciting young quarterback, Justin Fields. So we're going to talk all about that in this video. I do ask before we get started, do a quick favor for me. Please do hit that like button down below. Really does a great job pushing this video out to other NFL fans just like you. This series, this video really is a major time commitment to take these deep dives into these teams, which means I can't put up quite as much content on a volume basis as I normally would. So it's very important to me that these videos do well. Hitting that like button is the best way to support my channel right now. So please do take a second to hit that down below. I really appreciate it. Also, if you enjoy the video, make sure you subscribe if you aren't already, so you don't miss another deep dive as we count down to the number one team in my power rankings throughout this offseason. But without further ado, let's get into this Chicago Bears team. So our first order of business is to take a look at this team's really busy offseason. And I mentioned a complete overhaul of this team's staff, head coach, GM, really going to take a year here, not to tank, but to get younger and assess who the core players of this team might be. And as a result of that, you're seeing the departure of a lot of existing talent here on both sides of the ball. And you're also not seeing them really rush to the table to emergently bring in a bunch of talent to replace those losses. And that's why we talk about a transition year here in Chicago. And there's conversations to be had on if that's the most healthy decision to make when you have Justin Fields entering such an important year too. Surely a conversation we're going to have when we get to Justin Fields here in just a little bit. But let's talk about these moves and who's leaving. It's going to be Allen Robinson leaving. Big shoes to fill for Darnell Mooney as this team's number one wide receiver. Even Damiere Byrd got the second most amount of snaps of any receiver on this team not named Darnell Mooney last year. They're going to see Jimmy Graham out the door. That's more of a departure than a loss, complete non-factor last year, but is going to leave an opening for a second tight end here. Jermaine Ifedi, again, pretty similar to Jimmy Graham, but James Daniels is leaving. Gets a nice contract to go to Pittsburgh. This was a player I would have made a priority to retain, and they're going to let him go. They also will be saying goodbye to Jason Peters, who, believe it or not, at 39 years old, was actually a borderline top 10 left tackle for the Bears last year. Watching this team back, I was watching him like, man, this guy looks good. They might be able to get him back, which would be great. He might be holding out maybe a better team to take a look at him. But yeah, that's a big loss at left tackle. Going into the year, I did not think we'd be saying that. But Jason Peters is kind of back, or at least he was last year. But he's currently an impending free agent, leaving Chicago here. But then on defense as well, losing really what has been the identity of this front four in, I guess, what you could call the Khalil Mack era. Not just Khalil Mack, obviously, on the way out, but the trifecta of defensive tackles. Akeem Hicks, Eddie Goldman, Bilal Nichols, all these guys gone and needing to be replaced. A very much new look defensive line coming in. Alec Ogletree was their number 2 linebacker last year, opening up opportunity as a starter there, along with Tashawn Gibson. So a couple of veterans that they're not really going to miss, but again, leaving opportunities open. Then the key additions here as we look at what they did to replace some of that talent. Definitely far from a net positive with the wide receiver room, as Byron Pringle, who's kind of a wide receiver 4, is going to come in from Kansas City. They draft Velus Jones in the 3rd round, their first offensive selection. Potentially the best pound-for-pound offensive player that they signed here, Kari Blasingame, will be a meaningful fullback in this Shanahan-style offense. He'll be their Kyle Juszczyk, if you will. Lucas Patrick is their answer to replace James Daniels, was with Luke Getsy in Green Bay, should be at least a Band-Aid veteran. I do list Tevin Jenkins as an addition, someone that was, in my opinion, a first-round talent who only got to play about 4 or 5 games last year, so a nice boost to the offensive line. Defensively, they're going to bring in some veteran Band-Aids so that they have some talent up in that front 7 to replace some of those big losses they had. So Al-Qadin Muhammad is going to follow Matt Eberflus over from Indianapolis. Just a little bit of friendly nepotism there. Someone that Eberflus has always appreciated in Indianapolis for his run defense. Justin Jones, Nicholas Moreau, guys with some starting experience in this league. And then some exciting additions in the secondary. Kyler Gordon out of Washington, Jaquan Brisker out of Penn State, a pair of 2nd-round picks. A lot of people surprised to see them invest in defense with those first 2 picks, knowing what Justin Fields has to work with. But massive improvements in that secondary. They also signed Tavon Young to hopefully upgrade that slot corner position that's been a problem for them really since Bryce Callahan left. So a very busy offseason. Before we get into this roster, I do want to talk about these staff changes and what these sides of the ball might look from a schematic perspective as well. So, of course, Matt Eberflus coming in as the head coach. I rank him potentially stupid high. I actually think a lot of people are going to disagree with this. Bears fans will be happy to see it. I rank him 13th in the league for head coaches. I genuinely believe he's one of the most well-qualified head coach candidates of the last 5 years. Really, when you look at what he's done in Indianapolis, it started 3-4 years ago in a situation like they have in Chicago right now, where it was a roster just deprived of talent. And with Eberflus organizing that defense, they were never a bad unit. And by the time he left, they were a very good unit. His ability to get a defense to all be on the same page, get guys to play fast, and get, late round picks and undrafted free agents and cheap free agents to outperform their pay grade is why Eberflus finds himself as a head coach here in Chicago. And I genuinely believe he's going to do a very good job of that. I think there are certain notes to make when you hire a defensive head coach about you have to really nail your offensive coordinator. And when you do, he's very likely going to leave to get a head coaching job elsewhere. So even if you like a Luke Getsy hire, which I do, you might find yourself in a few years frustrated with a defensive head coach, because that's just the way things go in the league right now. But as far as how good he is as a head coach, I don't have any reservations at all. I think they got a damn good head coach, and I'm going to get criticized for ranking him as high as 13th. Look, there's a lot of new head coaches in the league, and I think Eberflus is going to be better than a lot of those guys and better than a lot of the existing head coaches as well. We'll see how this plays out, but a lot of people thought the Bears should have ranked 32nd or 31st. The reason they rank ahead of the Jags and the Texans is because of Matt Eberflus. There's no shying away from that. They actually rank 6th for defensive coaching for me. If he was still in Indianapolis, you're probably talking about him as 2 or 3. Might have some delays implementing all of the bells and whistles of what he likes to do, but he also gets to bring over Alan Williams, who has been his defensive backs coach. So a friendly face next to him. Again, a lot of nepotism in this league, but Alan Williams, very qualified, of course, has been there with Eberflus for a while, was probably starting to get some buzz for defensive coaching positions. But Eberflus, a no-brainer to bring him with him, and he's going to get that promotion in doing so. As far as what the scheme's going to look defensively, they're a very standard 4-3 defense. I think this is one of those defenses that doesn't overcomplicate things and really does allow younger and cheaper players to come in and play fast, know your role, don't bust coverages, all that stuff. It's a very zone-heavy system They're towards the bottom 10 year to year in man coverage percentage, but they really do mix up their zones very well. A lot of split safety stuff as opposed to single high cover 3, not in the quarters heavy Fangio Staley sense of the word, more so typical cover 2 and a nice dose of cover 3 buzz as well, where you're gonna maybe show cover 4, show cover 2, and have one of those free safeties buzz down into a mid zone. In general, though, just a very well-balanced 4-3 base defense. And then you look at the offensive side of the ball, and I really like the Luke Getsy hire as well. I was getting questions before they hired Matt Eberflus of sort of what kind of offensive coach do you want the Bears to hire, and in what scheme do you want that coach to come from? And it was a no-brainer for me. I want Justin Fields in a Shanahan play-action heavy offense. We are going to get to Fields in just a second, but I think simplifying what he needs to read and really buying into his mobility, his amazing ability to hit the deep ball and use that arm talent, the threat of his mobility to really help play fakes and set up play action as well. This is the perfect fit for Justin Fields. And as their 2021 season went on with Matt Nagy, you saw them really starting to run a lot more play action and play action boot game. And I do think that is when Justin Fields was at his best. So now you get an even better offensive mind for that system. This has potential to be the perfect scheme for Justin Fields. So that's very exciting. No, we haven't seen Luke Getsy call plays or anything like that, but I do think he's more than qualified. I think he's learned from some excellent coaches, not just LaFleur, but Nathaniel Hackett above him. It's a proven system, and we've seen a lot of coordinators in this coaching tree thrive elsewhere, and I think it's going to be more of the same with Luke Getsy. So if you were going to go with a defensive head coach, I think they did an excellent job assessing the type of coach that they would want and the type of scheme that should be implemented for Justin Fields. So I do applaud them for that hire. I had some hesitation with the defensive head coach for Justin Fields in year 2, but I think they did the right thing, getting a good OC under him. So let's start this off by talking about the big ticket here, Justin Fields. Topic A, B, and C for the Bears in 2022. It is all about finding out what kind of development you can see in Justin Fields this year. So when the Bears took him with the 11th pick last year, they traded a future first to go get him. Myself and pretty much everyone I saw loved this pick. I think I gave it an A+. You just typically do not find quarterbacks with this much potential with the 11th pick in the draft. No, Fields is much more of your typical number 1, number 2, number 3 overall pick. So the excitement with Justin Fields is off the freaking charts. The things he's able to do with the football in his hands are just different than what pretty much any quarterback in the league is capable of. And when things go right and when he makes those spectacular plays, your jaw just drops and he does shit that just changes football games. And that's what gets you excited, right? But when the Bears drafted him, I also tried to warn Bears fans that, look, there's also a lot of really bad stuff on his Ohio State tape and a lot of bad tendencies. And when he gets to Chicago, the goal is going to be not necessarily to eliminate those bad tendencies. You almost never see that happen. But if nothing else, just weed them out, reduce the consistency in which the bad stuff happens so that the baseline of play gets raised. And then when those spectacular things happen, you end up with great quarterback play that also leads to winning football. So what are some of those issues with Justin Fields' game? Well, it's the same stuff that was at Ohio State that plagued him, frankly, in his rookie season, because it was not a very good rookie season. It was not a good rookie season at all. Yes, the flashes were there, but there was a ton of bad out there as well. And what bothered me about Fields at Ohio State, that still bothers me from his rookie tape in Chicago, is holding on the ball way too long. His time to throw was the largest of any starting quarterback in the league. It's turnover-worthy stuff as he's holding onto the football. He's making bad decisions. He's putting the ball in harm's way. He's fumbling the football. Led the league in turnover-worthy play percentage last year. And then the other thing is just a lack of poise, composure in the pocket, ability to confidently step up in the pocket, climb to read number 2, trust the rhythm and structure of the offense the way it's intended to be, so that you can have some more of that baseline consistency that just is non-existent with Justin Fields. So here in his second season, there's 3 things that I'd really love to see him work on. Number 1 is I want to see him speed up in the quick game. He can make the right reads on these plays, whether it's stick or RPOs, pulling it, throwing it on an alert route to the sideline. It's not that he's a bad decision maker in these situations. I just need to see him speed it up. And it sounds simple. It sounds meaningless. But if he can trigger on these plays about a quarter of a second, even a half a second sooner, you're talking about getting the ball in the hands of his receivers with about a step or 2 extra separation. That buys him time to turn upfield, actually make that first defender miss, having the other defenders coming from further away, and those 4-yard, 5-yard easy completions, all of a sudden they can turn into making a guy miss and going 10 yards, 20 yards, getting explosives off of those plays. You talk about Luke Getsy coming over from Green Bay. Yes, Aaron Rodgers is the back-to-back MVP. Yes, he does a lot of great stuff. One of those things he does great is he has the quickest release of any quarterback in the NFL. And you get a ton of easy yards after catch from Aaron Rodgers. And I really think Luke Getsy is going to work on that with Justin Fields. Now, he has a little bit of a windy release. That may or may not be something they can work on, but just recognizing the coverages, recognizing the decisions he needs to make on these plays, and getting that ball out just a little bit quicker, starting his release a little bit sooner, is going to go a long way. This play right here against the Niners is a great example. He's pulling it on an RPO, throwing that alert to the flat because he's got off coverage and no one else to make a play on this ball. This is something that's absolutely going to be a part of Luke Getsy's offense, just as it was in Matt Nagy's offense. And you can see Fields right here, he just clutches this ball a little bit too long. If he can trigger on this, start that release, get the ball in Mooney's hands here, just a quarter of a second, even on this play, might even be a half second sooner, you can see how much further away these defenders are going to be, how Mooney's going to be in a better position to make this guy miss. It's going to go a long way towards helping Justin Fields. So that's a little bit of easy growth that I want to see from Fields. I also would love to see him throw with a little bit more touch and ability to layer into the second level. It's just going to help him with his accuracy. This is something that Josh Allen really worked on. You're going to hear me say a lot of Josh Allen parallels to what you want to see Justin Fields work on. Because remember, Josh Allen's rookie season was not pretty. But if Fields can learn to throw some of these posts or back shoulders over the middle of the field with a little bit more touch, you're going to see better accuracy. You're going to see the receivers have a better chance of catching these balls as opposed to Fields just basically only having a fastball. So that's something I'd love to see. That would be a great sign that he's working and developing. And then the third thing is, of course, the processing, the poise in the pocket. This is something you'd say about pretty much any rookie quarterback, but I do think it is at a particularly low level from Justin Fields. And it's not so much, he's going to make his first read and run. Yes, he does that fairly consistently, and it's very frustrating when he does that, and I don't want to see him do that at the level that he does. That's something you want to see him work on. But it's not that simple. That's Jalen Hurts, that's Drew Lock. They're very consistently just making that first read and then taking off. Fields, again, will do that, but there's also a frustrating flip side of it with Justin Fields, where oftentimes he's gluing in on that first read and holding onto the ball way too long. Led the NFL in time to throw last year, and we know the Bears don't have a good offensive line, so that is Justin Fields holding the ball too long. And it ends up, he takes a lot of bad sacks, turns the ball over a ton as he's trying to play hero ball. And it's not a situation where I want you to just take off and run more often. I want to see Justin Fields step up in the pocket, trust that offensive line. Now, giving him a better offensive line would certainly help his ability to grow in that department, but there's a lot of times where the pocket's there and he needs to step up, get that head around to that backside dig, the seam up the middle of the field, or check down, whatever it may be in the structure of that play call. Fields just does not have that natural poise to step up, get to number 2, everything's going to be okay. He's just simply not a natural passer in the pocket is what it comes down to. And this is not all going to develop in year 2. He's not going to go from what Fields was last year to being Tom Brady next year. But you just want to see a little bit more consistency, him feel more comfortable with the offense, trust that offensive line a little bit more. I understand the O-line is not trustworthy, and we're going to get into the surrounding situation and why it's a problem here. But it's not always the offensive line's fault. There are plenty of examples on tape where the protection is there, the structure of the offense is there, and he's just uncomfortable executing it. So that's a big thing for Fields, that you really need to see some growth. It's not all going to get there in year 2, but that is where you start to talk about the surrounding situation here not being very good. We're going to talk about the O-line and the weaponry here. It's a train wreck. And we've seen talented quarterbacks like Justin Fields with some bad tendencies in a bad situation. Instead of weeding out those bad tendencies, they actually get amplified by a bad offensive line, by a bad play caller, by bad receivers, and it gets stuck and you break the quarterback. You don't even have to leave Chicago to see the last time that happened with Mitch Trubisky. And really the goal for the Bears in 2022, as I rank Justin Fields 25th in the league, see that grow a little bit. Walk out of the year saying he's about the 21st best quarterback and say, we accomplished getting rid of some of his bad tendencies, whatever percentage of those issues I just listed may be, but you get rid of some of that stuff, you increase the baseline of play and say, he's playing with confidence. We didn't break him with a horrible situation around him. Heading into year 3 now, Chicago can improve the offensive line, improve the receivers. But that's almost a best case scenario. The worst case here is this stuff breaks Fields, and this regime is comfortable with that because this is not the GM that drafted Justin Fields. This is not the coach that drafted Justin Fields, and that they leave him out to dry and he busts. Frankly, that is a possible outcome here with Justin Fields. The range is incredible. There's a world where in 2 years from now, Justin Fields is a top 5 quarterback and the best quarterback in the NFC North. And there's a world where he's not the starting quarterback for the Chicago Bears in 2 years. So this is a really important year to take the right steps. Don't break Justin Fields. Start to implement some structure here for Fields. But let's now talk about what they've done with the weaponry and the offensive line here. So let's start with the weapons, where they rank 32nd in the NFL for me. But as we look at these weapons, I've been doing these deep dives, I think 5 years now. You can make a case this is the worst group of weapons we've evaluated in the history of this series. And I like Darnell Mooney. I like Darnell Mooney a lot. Bears fans are going to be like, what the hell? We got Darnell Mooney. I agree. Mooney's sweet. And this is a huge year for him to show if maybe he can be a number 1 wide receiver. He's a little bit more slender. Never going to be a true ball winner or some big physical traditional X wide receiver. But I think he could be Calvin Ridley or maybe Brandon Cooks. Like, those are number 1 receivers in my eyes, even though they're not big-bodied guys. Maybe even Stephon Diggs, but Diggs a little bit taller, a little bit bigger catch radius. All in all, I really like Darnell Mooney. This 32nd ranking is not about Darnell Mooney. I think he's going to get a bazillion targets here, like fantasy football. I think he's going to be a beast. I wouldn't be surprised if Mooney is like a top 10 to 15 fantasy wide receiver, because who the hell else are they going to throw the ball to? This guy's a great route runner. He's an exceptional athlete with really quick, fluid feet that can obviously translate as a route runner. Solid hands, not a huge contested catch guy, but really stable, secure hands going back to his time in college. He's a good run blocker as well for a slender guy, very willing, good after the catch. There's very little not to like about Darnell Mooney, and a big year for him. Excited to see what heights he might be able to reach this year. But after him, excuse me. Sorry, I just looked at the screen for a second. It's so bad. Like, what are they doing? It's that bad. Byron Pringle, who's the absolute definition of a wide receiver 4, decent at everything, doesn't stand out or do anything at a even good level. Like, he's above average at pretty much everything. Great run blocker, but he's going to be your wide receiver 2? Really? Then they draft Velus Jones in the 3rd round. I like Velus Jones. I had probably a higher grade on Velus Jones than consensus. I think he was my wide receiver 14. I do think he was probably the best wide receiver for their system at that pick. I'm excited to see what he can do here. But man, you are like almost desperate that he is a starting caliber player as a rookie, and I don't feel great about that. And even then, he's 24 years old already. He's going to be 25 in his rookie season. At Tennessee, he was kind of a gadget player and a deep threat. Really liked what I saw from him at the Senior Bowl. This dude has incredible athletic potential, dealt with some really bad quarterback play at Tennessee. I do think his best football is ahead of him. And when you talk about this Shanahan system, you want guys with speed that can run away from guys on deep posts, flag routes to the corner, deep crossing routes, as well as the ability to just get the ball in his hands, whether that's jet sweeps or bubble screens, all of it. He definitely fits that skill set, and he could surprise as a rookie, but he was far from a refined receiver at Tennessee. I'll just say that. So for him to be kind of your 3rd guy here, that's a major concern. You know, most teams have Velus Jones as like their 5th receiver competing for playing time. Here he's thrust into pretty much a starting role. You have Daz Newsome, who's a good slot receiver, but I don't see him getting much outside of, 3rd down work where he can work from the slot. I don't have a problem with him as a depth piece. Dante Pettis and Tajay Sharp are, established veteran wide receiver 5 types, like bodies there. Both guys about 6'1", more slender guys that work really well over the middle of the field. I would describe these guys as poor man's Kendrick Bournes, where they do their best work on kind of dig routes and working from the slot, decent run after catch and run block types, but not perimeter players, just smaller guys with a lack of speed who have just kind of been capped out in this league. They sign Equinemius St. Brown, who's the complete opposite. He's a guy that has no physical limitations, but has no idea what he's doing on a football field. David Moore, kind of a deep threat to compete for a roster spot. Nasimba Webster, Isaiah Coulter, probably practice squad talents there. I've never seen Finke and Shaw play, but they're probably not making the team here. So this is the worst wide receiver room in the NFL. I don't know if I guess maybe their Green Bay counterpart, it might be somewhat close. You look at the other playmakers here, and it's not enough to boost this outside of the 32nd room. Cole Kmet in year 3. You'd love to see him take some big step, but to me, he's a starting caliber possession tight end. Really good with the ball in his hands. Really physical guy that's really difficult to tackle and bring down, but just not a exceptional athlete to separate, whether he's running away from guys or just to have wiggle in his routes. It's mostly check down work or possession catches like in traffic, where he's not even great at winning those difficult balls. A 2nd round pick, a guy in year 3 that you hope takes a big step, but at this point you're not counting on that. And I don't know if he is or ever was a guy that had the potential to become more than what he is right now. That's why I didn't like that pick when they made it. I thought he was going to be exactly what he's been, and I'm not super optimistic that he's going to turn into more than that. They signed James O'Shaughnessy, who's a decent backup. Ryan Griffin's a blocking specialist. Ryzen John is kind of an interesting lighter 6'7" project that they've had in the works here. And Chase Allen was a big-bodied blocking guy for Iowa State. Might make this team. Jake Tungus, I have not watched. So there's your tight end room. Definitely towards the bottom in the league. And then your running backs. I like David Montgomery. Good guy with the ball in his hands. Good pair of hands. Not some excellent route runner or an explosive receiving back, but a reliable one. Khalil Herbert had his ups and downs, a couple drops in the receiving game. Very similar body to David Montgomery, but less proven. Darrington Evans, in theory, could get healthy and be an explosive receiving back along with Treston Ebner. Both guys fairly similar, high 40-time guys, straight line speed definitely there. Ebner caught the ball well to the backfield at Baylor. He could get some third down work along with Darrington Evans potentially if he could stay healthy. That's been the issue for him. He was a third-round pick for Tennessee 3 years ago, but again, just couldn't stay healthy. With the tragic injury to Tariq Cohen in a practice or training, there is going to be maybe an opportunity for someone to take more of a receiving back role here. But yeah, 32nd for offensive weapons. Really don't expect a whole lot of pushback on that either. It's a really questionable group and team building by this staff. I get you're in a transition, but you got to give Justin Fields more than that. And it also doesn't hurt that this offensive line's not very good either. They rank 31st for me for pass protection. So 32nd for weapons, 31st for pass protection. This is undoubtedly the biggest nightmare for any quarterback in the league if you just want to talk about surrounding talent. And that's scary with everything we talked about with Justin Fields already. But with this offensive line, your tackle situation is completely up in the air here. It looks like Tevin Jenkins will be the right tackle. I just read a news piece today that said he plans on moving back to his natural position. It's just totally in the air. Like, you could flip him and Larry Borum, or maybe they're able to get Jason Peters back. If I were a Bears fan, I would definitely be hoping for that. He looked really good last year. He's a great mentor for a guy like Larry Borum. But right now, as of this recording, not on the team. And if that's the case, it looks like Larry Borum's going to slide over to left, or maybe they flip these guys back because that's where they had it when both were healthy, was Jenkins at right and Borum at left. But anyway, Jenkins, the better of the two, again, only played like 4 games last year. I did think Jenkins was a first-round talent, and I love that they got him after they drafted Justin Fields. Of course, the injury was really unfortunate, and maybe that's why they were able to get him to begin with. But he is healthy heading into this offseason. I do think when he played, he looked pretty solid in pass protection. Not the quickest feet, not the most amazing athlete, and it might put a cap on his upside, but man, when he gets his hands on you, you're going nowhere. I do think his technique for a rookie is really solid and should only get better. So you like that about him. So I do have pretty high expectations for Tevin Jenkins. He's probably the piece on this O-line that you're the most excited about. You know, Larry Borum, I do like Larry Borum, and he was actually one of my guys as like a day 3 guy to keep an eye on. I thought his athleticism and technique was pretty good from a pass protection standpoint. I thought it was going to translate as a run blocker as well. And he got out there as a rookie and played better than most rookie tackles will, especially for a day 3 pick. So they might just want to roll with these two and see if they could get these guys to develop into, a nice tackle duo. I think there's a chance that happens. I think both guys have nice theoretical upside. You're, of course, going to have your learning curves if that's the route you're going to go for, and you're going to subject Justin Fields to some suspect pass protection if that's the route you want to go. But that's the trade-off that they're facing right now. You get a lot older as you look inside. Cody Whitehair's been a stable at left guard. I like Cody Whitehair. He's the best player they have. Very balanced player. Gives you center guard flexibility. You're happy that he's still there. Sam Mustafa at center is younger. Has, started 2 years now and didn't really get better in 2021 from 2020. Certainly not to the degree you would have hoped for. So he does seem to be a little bit capped. Just not the best at attaching and sustaining blocks in the run game, especially. But as a pass protector, not the strongest guy either, not the best technique. Just seems to me to be a good backup center that's thrust into a starting position right now. Lucas Patrick, better at guard than he is at center, but another player that, gives them flexibility. You could see Patrick at center and Mustafa at guard, and maybe that's your best arrangement. But either way, I do think both these guys are starting because your depth here is foot fungus. But Patrick's a nice Band-Aid signing. Nothing more, nothing less. Balanced player, really smart guy with a ton of experience, solid athleticism. I think he'll do fine, but definitely a guy that will lose as well. As I mentioned, the depth, it's hard to even talk about these guys. I mean, you don't even have a swing tackle here that you feel good about. I kind of lump Braxton Jones and Ja'Tyre Carter together. A couple of day 3 picks that have a lot of developmental upside. You hope that, with Getsy coming in this system, you hope you can develop these guys in your system, but not players you want seeing the field in year 1. Both guys with atrocious footwork and pass protection. Jones more of a tackle, Carter more of a guard, but 2 guys that definitely need a year to be groomed. You've got a couple of veteran Band-Aids, guys like Julian Davenport, Dakota Dozier, Sean Coleman. These are guys that have started games in the NFL. Has not been pretty when they did, but at least they offer some experience as you hope to develop these guys. Latavius Simmons was brought in here a year ago, and they weren't able to get anything from him. So anything you get from him is house money, but he's probably plugged in behind Braxton Jones and Ja'Tyre Carter, who this regime is investing in. One guy to kind of keep an eye on here would be Zach Thomas for me. Mauler in the run game. Played in that run-heavy San Diego State offense, but from a pass protection standpoint, just really slow feet, but was a tackle. So if he slides into guard and some of that tackle experience translates to the point where he's functional, there could be something there. I thought he was a really intriguing player, really good 10-yard split time for a guy that was not viewed as a good athlete, and it translated to his ability in the run game. But again, in pass protection was really ugly, but we have not seen him at guard. So keep an eye on Zach Thomas to maybe be the best of these rookies they drafted. They also draft Doug Kramer, very experienced Illinois center. I see a really low upside for him, but maybe someone that could play center in a pinch as a decent backup on that rookie contract. And DeLance, Willie Wright, Iceland, I don't see those guys even competing for roster spots here. But there's your offensive line, especially from a pass protection standpoint. It's brutal. We'll revisit this group when we get into the run game ranking. But let's rank this passing game. Can you guess? I'll give you 5 seconds. Yeah. They rank 32nd. It's not a good group here. The quarterback situation is what it is, but surrounding Justin Fields with the 32nd ranked weaponry, 31st ranked offensive line, a first-year play caller who I like, but as a first-year play caller in Luke Getsy, I don't expect this offense to be very pretty. There's going to be some explosive flashes in there with Mooney and even maybe Velus Jones, you hope, and Fields, but oh man. It's going to be a year or two before we get excited about this offense. Now, I do think things get a little bit better from a run game perspective, just kind of in every phase. You've got, for me, the 12th ranked running back room in the league. I think David Montgomery is even underrated. A guy that never tested very well, but he actually has a lot of athletic juice when he's out there. He's got really good burst into the hole. He's excellent with his vision on inside zone. And even when he clears into the second level, he's one of these backs that, he just doesn't, he does get caught from behind. I'm not going to act like he's some crazy burner or anything, but he has deceptive speed for whatever reason, and it does show. I really like David Montgomery. Entering a contract year here, is he the highest upside player? Is he this elite running back? No, but I do think he's right around the 10th best back in the league and is going to be a nice contributor in the run game here. Khalil Herbert's an excellent backup, very like-bodied to David Montgomery. That's why you can kind of picture kind of passing of the torch here to a younger back of a similar style. Herbert does not have the power that David Montgomery has, and I don't think he has that next gear that David Montgomery has either. So this could just be a nice 1-2 punch where your backup is a similar guy. You can run all the same stuff and not key off to the defense that you're going to have to change your style, but just get that next gear from David Montgomery. Herbert did have to play a decent amount of games last year, and he showed that he can be a solid starting caliber back when he's in there. So you got a nice 1-2 punch. You'll keep these guys fresh. They're going to break a lot of tackles, and both guys with great vision. So you do like the running back room a lot. You got Darrington Evans is a little bit of that speed threat with Treston Ebner. Those two guys are kind of like-minded bodies in a lot of ways as well. Those two players right there, Evans and Ebner, kind of fit more of that wide zone idea of get the corner, and on a well-blocked run, you can have that Raheem Mostert or Matt Breida or Aaron Jones, where if he can get that corner, he's got the home run speed. Dalvin Cook is another example. Derrick Henry, guys with great home run hitting speed. That's more of what you can get potentially in Evans if he could stay healthy ever, and Treston Ebner, who had some explosive runs at Baylor. As far as the other contributors in the run game go, without getting too far into it, I really like what Mooney and Pringle do as run blockers. I think that's a nice duo to set the edge for those wide zones. I like the addition of Kari Blossingame, one of the 5 to 6 best fullbacks in the league. I would say he's been in this Shanahan system going back to Minnesota and Tennessee and now in Chicago. Going to be very comfortable, very logical signing to add him to this room. It allows them to run a lot of those outside zone systems that they want to run. Cole Kmet's just kind of an average blocker. Ryan Griffin will get in 12 personnel, and he's a great blocker. Has been on the Jets, playing in a similar system, so kind of plug and play there as well. O'Shaughnessy is really just your classic backup tight end, jack of all trades, master of none type. Chase Allen did play a blocking role at Iowa State. He could be a potential replacement for a guy like Ryan Griffin as that second tight end, more of a blocking specialist, really big, strong dude. I like what he could potentially bring to the table, but an undrafted rookie, no guarantee that he makes the team. You also have to note that Justin Fields is going to give this team one of the best quarterback run game multipliers in the league, giving them an overall boost of 4.5% in my rating calculations. The read option is very real with Justin Fields, and just him as a runner is going to provide a big threat. But beyond that, his threat to peel back and keep the ball on a play action boot, which is going to be a huge threat in this system, it prevents that backside defensive end from crashing down, which just buys a little bit of extra comfort for these backs, opens up cutback lanes. That threat of the run from the quarterback is a big deal, and the Bears definitely have it. And they have a coach in Luke Getsy that's going to lean into all this stuff, and these pieces all make sense together. And then just to revisit the offensive line there as well, I think it is worth noting that Whitehair is a little bit better as a run blocker moving forward than he is in his consistency in pass pro, and definitely Tevin Jenkins is significantly better as a run blocker than a pass protector right now. You love what Tevin Jenkins does in the game, in the run game, and in this system, he's going to be able to get on the move, climb to the second level. And he's not Trent Williams from an athletic standpoint. He's not even close. But when he gets there, very similar ability to Barry, linebackers and safeties, even defensive ends. Just put him in the dirt, like straight up pancake blocks on the move. Tevin Jenkins did a ton of that at Oklahoma State, and I think you're going to see some really exciting impact blocks from Tevin Jenkins. Guys like Braxton Jones and Jatiri Carter, if they do get on the field, it's because they are really good athletes and good run blockers as well. So in a depth situation or in a situation where they just decide, you know what, Patrick, you're our center. We want to see what Tyree Carter can do, or we want to see what Braxton Jones can do, or maybe Larry Borum gets benched. If they get in there in this system, these guys really are good fits for that kind of move block system. So it might take some time again for them to earn those opportunities. But when you look at the depth, and we talked a little bit about Zach Thomas being a really good run blocker as well, I do think from a run block perspective, it's a little bit better. This is still a horrible offensive line. They ranked 29th overall for run blocking. but it is a notch better as run blockers as it is as pass protectors. So the run game as a whole actually ranks 17th for me. It's the second biggest reason outside of Matt Eberflus's existence for why this team ranks maybe a spot or two higher than I think a lot of people expected. If you want to look at what's going to be the most helpful for Justin Fields out of all of this garbage, I do think it will be the run game with these backs and a system that will buy into his ability as a runner. But even then, we're not talking about some unstoppable run game by any metric. But that 17th run game does keep them out of the worst ranked offense, where we did have the Houston Texans ranking 32nd. Chicago's going to come in 31st. And frankly, I don't think they have a ton of potential to get much higher than that, unless you start talking about, okay, they added back Jason Peters and Will Fuller, and you're getting huge steps forward from Mooney and Fields and Tevin Jenkins, and maybe one of these young offensive linemen beyond that take a big step up. Then maybe you can talk about them having the 24th best offense, but that's about the ceiling in my mind. So I guess we'll just have to hope that that's enough to not break Justin Fields, is essentially what it's all about for this offense this year. But now let's flip over to the defensive side of the ball. Matt Eberflus's new look defense here. Definitely a lot of lowly faces, I guess I will just put it bluntly here, but players that I am excited to see if Eberflus can get the most out of. But it's not the most talented defense. It's frankly one of the least talented defenses in the league. It starts with that pass rush up front that ranks 31st in the league for me. There's no way around it. It's not going to be a good pass rush. They're going to struggle to get after the quarterback. And if there's been a criticism of Matt Eberflus' defenses, it has been a lack of talent up front and a lack of ability to scheme up a lot of pressure. So that's a huge concern for this defense. Definitely the biggest concern. You do have Robert Quinn. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I don't expect him to repeat a 17 sack season or whatever it was. You know, he converted a crazy amount of his pressures into sacks. And part of that is when he wins in dominant ways. It's not just he got a bunch of fluke cleanup sacks or anything like that. Like, he has dominant wins. His cross chop is the literal, like, coach's clinic for how to execute a cross chop move, and he still does it at a high level. He still has bend and get off and other pass rush complements other than great power. And I think that power is why those pressure numbers are a little bit lower. When he loses, he gets locked up pretty consistently. So he's a good number 2 rusher in my eyes. And I know a lot of Bears fans will say, oh, he had 17 sacks. He's a true number 1. I disagree. I think you're probably getting closer to like 10 sacks this year, which is great, but not someone that's dominating down to down like a true number 1 does. And that's reflected by his, 49, 50 pressures is about what I think you'll get from him again. And that's assuming he doesn't regress or show year-to-year streakiness like he's done in his career. But beyond him is where you really start to get concerned. I do list Travis Gibson as the kind of pass rushing edge here. He's going to be, I think, in about a 50-50 split with Al-Qadim Muhammad. Gibson, another guy, 10 sacks last year on 26 pressures. You just don't, you're not going to convert 30% of your pressures into sacks. The league average for that is about half of that. You get 26 pressures, you can expect 5 sacks max. Especially from Travis Gibson, who is a guy that tends to win a little bit more with power. But, it's not that he's a bad player, but he is not a 10-sack player. He has not nearly shown that consistency. He's had some dominant games with some really impressive reps where he'll steamroll guys, and he's done a great job losing weight, buying into this defense. I like Travis Gibson, but he's not even really an established number 2 guy. Don't let those 10 sacks fool you. He's going to be in a rotation with Al-Qadim Muhammad there, who's more of an early down run defending specialist. They were never able to get him to be a true starting pass rusher in Indianapolis. I think that Eberflus recognizes that. He'll play that same role in Indianapolis. That's why we'll see more Gibson on pass rushing downs, especially because Gibson has struggled at times against the run. Behind that, you got Atauchu, who I'm not sure if he'll make the team or not. Established veteran depth, but whatever. Dominique Robinson, they draft a little bit earlier than I would have taken him, honestly. He's another older rookie. They clearly were not afraid of age with these guys. But a converted wide receiver has only been playing the position for a couple of years, but he's not some true freak athlete for a developmental prospect. I thought he was more of a 6th round to a priority free agent kind of guy. I think they spent a 4th round pick on him. You might see them throwing him out there just to see what he can do, but I don't like that. I really don't think he's going to be able to win in a whole lot of ways as a rookie. He really needs to refine his pass rush tool belt. The only other guy worth talking about here is Charles Snowden for me. Interesting 6'7", 240-pound hybrid edge type. I liked him more in the former system. I don't know if he'll make the team. It's a different regime that liked him, but a unique skill set that I still think there's something there. So obviously an edge group that's not very good, and unfortunately the interior defensive line pass rush is even worse. Mario Edwards is probably your best interior rusher, and that ain't good. I mean, he wouldn't be a starting interior rusher for most teams. He took a step back last year. It was pretty good in 2020, but more of a 4-eye, kind of that 3-4 end type. And they'll have a role for him. He'll play the same role that we saw them get Danico Autry paid back from Indianapolis to Tennessee. They were looking for the same thing in Dio Odeyingbo. There is a role for that pass rushing, kind of lighter 3 technique in this defense, and there's a chance that this is one of those players that Eberflus can get a really good year out of. There's also a chance he gets cut because he was more of a scheme fit for the older regime. Justin Jones gets brought in here as a veteran Band-Aid, as a run defender. They kind of signed him when they struck out on getting a Larry Ogunjobi in free agency that they were prepared to pay like $40 million. Frankly, Bears fans, I think you may have dodged a bullet there. That obviously just sucks for Ogunjobi to miss out on that payday, but I do not think he was a player worth that number for you in a team that's trying to get cheaper and younger. That contract really didn't make sense to me, but they end up going with Justin Jones instead. Solid run defender, but has never done anything as a pass rusher, and at his age, you don't expect much from that. You know, he's going to kind of play that Grover Stewart role as more of your nose tackle here. The depth, you've got Angelo Blackson, just a Band-Aid veteran, DT4, if you will. Kyrus Tonga out of BYU, hoping to see more from him here in year 2. Big-bodied guy with a lot of just raw strength, a lot of untapped raw strength, and honestly, 3 more players that I have never watched play. LaCale London, Alzoya Alufohoyi, and Micah Du Treadway. Don't know anything about those guys, but we'll see if they make the team, I suppose. It's another group that I would love to see them add some more depth. It's a really bad interior defensive line group, rounding out the 31st pass rush in the entire league. From a coverage perspective, the linebackers here should be pretty good. I do rank them 8th there, so that's a strength of this team. You obviously love what Roquan brings to the table. You're still kind of waiting on Roquan to maybe break out as a superstar linebacker. I know a lot of Bears fans think he's there. I don't think he's quite in that tier with DeMario Davis, Kendricks, and even Darius Leonard, and sorry if I'm snubbing anybody, but there's a tier 1 of linebackers that I don't think Roquan has quite taken that next step to get into. I think he's right on the cusp waiting, and with what Matt Eberflus did with a Darius Leonard, you're definitely excited to see the impact Roquan Smith could have in a system that really allows these linebackers to fly around and make plays. So could be a big year for Roquan here as he looks for a contract extension here soon. Nicholas Moreau is another interesting piece next to him. I just mentioned how Eberflus has done a great job with those linebackers, especially. Moreau was an ascending, interesting starter for the Raiders in 2020, missed his 2021 season due to injury, and coming back healthy here, looks to be competing for a starting job. An athletic guy that, again, was on the rise before an injury set him back. If he can get healthy, he has potential to be a nice complement to Roquan there. and he couldn't ask for a better coach in Matt Eberflus to get that opportunity. And he should have a lot of that right there, opportunity, unless this team goes and adds like a Deion Jones or something if he gets cut. But, Matthew Adams has been kind of a special teamer for Indianapolis, is going to follow Eberflus over. He's got a chance to compete for that starting job. Joe Thomas has just been kind of a backup cover linebacker for years now. He might make it as that. Noah Dawkins, Caleb Johnson, and Jack Sanborn, I think, will duke it out for, one or two remaining roster spots there. Dawkins and Caleb Johnson are more lighter players, unproven coverage players, poor run defenders. Jack Sanborn, kind of the opposite, coming out of Wisconsin, could potentially be the best run defender out of all these guys, Roquan Smith included, but not a great athlete, not someone that moves super well in space, but they might like him as more of a run defending complement to a Roquan there. And if he makes the team, I would expect he's going to be right in the mix there with Moreau and Adams, at least in base defense, to maybe play a little bit of Mike linebacker. So I put those eye emotes next to him. I'm going to start doing that for undrafted players that I think could potentially surprise as UDFAs that get some starting playing time. But between Roquan and Moreau, I think you could do a lot worse, and I really like. I think that's a testament to what Roquan offers as a cover linebacker. You get to the secondary, and I think I actually like this secondary more than most. They actually rank 20th, which sounds pretty high. What I really like about this secondary is all these pieces make a ton of sense together. You have Jaylon Johnson there in year 3. Is just a very sound, big-bodied corner in a system that's going to run a lot of true zone here. He's going to be very like what Xavier Rhodes has been for the Colts for the last couple of years. Just a very sound, big-bodied corner. Not the best athlete, will lose one-on-one, but reliable. Kyler Gordon makes a ton of sense as well. Super good zone eyes and just an instinctive player, really physical player as well. I like that pick a lot. I think he's going to step in and provide a starting caliber corner right away and a chance to ascend to being a good number 2 complement with Jaylon Johnson there. And then Tavon Young in the slot with Thomas Graham is kind of your insurance policy there. So Tavon Young, I would say 4 years ago, was viewed as one of the best ascending nickel corners in the league, and then had about 3 straight years where he just could not stay on the field. Gets on the field for Baltimore last year, and on a defense that really kind of fell apart, he ironically was the one guy that stayed healthy. I don't know how that works, but if he can continue to get healthy, there's a chance that he can resume as a really good slot corner. If he can't, keep an eye on Thomas Graham. This guy finally got playing time late in last season, was one of my guys in last year's class, a dominant Senior Bowl player, one of the better Senior Bowls you'll see. And that's saying a lot because in one-on-one coverage down there, it's hard as hell to go against really good receivers and hang up man-to-man. He gets on the field the last 4 games of last season, and he was all over the place. Run game, making an impact, as a perimeter corner, making plays. There's a world as well where Thomas Graham steps outside, Kyler Gordon goes into the slot. You have some flexibility with those 3 players. I think Thomas Graham has a ton of potential to not just be a good nickel corner, but be a good perimeter corner as well. Super quick, flawless technique in man coverage. Not the fastest player. He will get stacked on the outside, and you're going to have to protect him in those situations. But there's similarities to him and Isaiah Rodgers, who broke out as a smaller corner on the outside for Indianapolis. Rodgers a little bit faster, but I think Graham is much more technically sound. So don't rule out Thomas Graham, even though they've brought in Gordon and Young here. I think you can rule out Kindle Vilder, who got a full runway of playing time last year, and it was mostly a nightmare. I like his athletic traits, and you hope something clicks, but you're not counting on that at this point. Duke Shelley, a good backup slot player, but also not someone that's established the ability to cover at a high level in the NFL. Lamar Jackson, a good backup to have for if anything happens to Jaylon Johnson. I think he might make this team as just that, because if you do lose Jaylon, all of these corners are under 6 feet tall, and you might want somebody to go match up with, a DJ Chark who's in this division now, Christian Watson, or whoever, even Allen Lazard, like some of these big-bodied receivers in this division. You don't want these smaller corners getting bodied. So, Lamar Jackson has gotten some playing time. and he's fine. And that's the soundbite you're looking for. For me to say that Lamar Jackson is a fine football player. Greg Stroman, probably a little bit too much slot depth for him to make it there. Another 5'11 slot type. And then Bo Pete Key's probably a practice squad guy there. Then you get to the safety room, and you have Eddie Jackson there. Bears fans have been waiting on Eddie Jackson to return to 2018 form since 2018. He's really just been an average starter in the last 3 years since. Actually hasn't had an interception in 2 seasons. Only 1 pass breakup last year. So he definitely has been on a downward trajectory. Really got an opportunity to be that ball hawk in 2018 with the pass rush they had and Amos next to him. Hasn't had that situation around him. I don't know if that's going to be the case this year. But this system is, in theory, a good spot for him where he can defend the post from cover 2. They'll use him as a single high free safety where they'll allow him to come downhill and make plays. Systematically, it's a good fit. I don't know if the kind of hybrid system was working out for him where he was really responsible for, using that speed to pick up deep crossers and kind of convert into man coverage a bunch. I think it kind of caught up with him in that sort of Fangio tree of defense. This will be a much more downhill role for him, and I think this is a player that Eberflus could revive. Big year for him, though. If he continues to struggle, we might see Eddie Jackson on the way out. And a bit of a hot take here, DeAndre Houston Carson has actually probably been the better safety ahead of Eddie Jackson over the last 2 years, but you obviously trust in that amazing 2018. You know that it's something greater is in there with Eddie Jackson, so he will start. But you're also going to be starting Jaquan Brisker next to Eddie Jackson, a rookie safety. I do imagine he's going to be out there. They drafted him in the 2nd round ahead of starting caliber receivers and offensive linemen for a reason. And Eberflus has traditionally had very much that free safety, strong safety relationship, as opposed to more of a Fangio style system where you want 2 kind of hybrid safeties. Obviously, Eddie Jackson's going to be your free. Jaquan Brisker will play the role that, say, Kari Willis plays. And I love that fit for Jaquan Brisker there. Phenomenal run defender. We'll talk about his impact in the run game, but that's why he's going to play that role. Really good in coverage as far as manning up tight ends, playing those shorter zones. When he had to go free and play too high, he didn't show the same instincts and range. So he can do that. He has plenty of speed to be a cover 2 safety and defend the post. But it's definitely nice to have Eddie Jackson next to him to allow these guys to kind of be at their best. So systematically, you're already seeing these safeties make sense. Now, I flirted with the idea of DeAndre Houston Carson here. He's played well every time they've called upon him. Not the best athlete in the world, but I think he has enough speed. I saw him chase down Deebo Samuel to prevent a big play touchdown. And I've seen him have pass breakups defending the post from cover 2. I've seen him man up tight ends from the slot. I've seen him defend the run. There's nothing he really can't do. Just for whatever reason, he's never been allowed to be a consistent starter. And maybe there's just, something missing with him. But he is at least a very complete, excellent third safety to have as depth, a guy that can play either free or strong safety and be a good backup. So I do like that he's there. I don't know if he's ever going to challenge for starting reps, but I think he could. They signed Dane Cruikshank, probably mostly just for special teams here. Really athletic guy, but Tennessee never really opened the door for him after an interesting rookie season. He would be kind of your Jaquan Brisker backup, a guy that's a little more comfortable, playing in the post, playing in the box. They draft Elijah Hicks out of California, another kind of special teams competitor. Not someone I was all that familiar with coming out, so we'll wait and see what he can do from a coverage perspective. I can't imagine they keep much more than those 5, with Joseph and Jones and Thomas kind of competing maybe for a 6th safety spot, but I think they'll elect to go with 5 there. So at DB, they rank 20th. I think these pieces make a ton of sense just together, kind of the skill sets they have and how they play off each other. But also in this system, they very much are going with Eberflus style D-backs, and I'm excited to see this group grow together, especially after they spent those top 2 picks on defensive backs, and 2 defensive backs that I liked. So they're going to rank 25th. Pass rush is the most heavily weighted position out of this group. Defensive back is weighted very heavily as well. So they're going to be far from perfect, but I think Eberflus will elevate this group. I think when you look at this roster, the talent that they're putting out here, you can make a case it's the worst roster in the league on the defensive side of the ball. But Eberflus gets a lot of the benefit of the doubt to elevate that. We've never seen a Matt Eberflus coach defense even be a bottom 12 defense. So it's difficult to imagine that happening all of a sudden. So he gets a ton of respect here. And then as you turn to the run defense, it's a little bit worse. You do have some good run defending specialists up front that should help. Justin Jones, El-Kadin Muhammad will be very comfortable in that role. Just not going to give you much from a pass rush perspective. I do think we see a lot more Angelo Blackson on earlier downs. Mario Edwards, not a true 3-down or just early down interior piece, I don't think. So Blackson's borderline a liability as a starter. He should be more of your fourth guy that just kind of rotates in occasionally. Robert Quinn is not the run defender that he is a pass rusher. You'll see some splash plays there when he really buys in, maybe a third down here when he wants to defend the run. He can do it, but he knows he needs to save that energy for third down where he really adds value. And that's why you might see Travis Gibson out there or even Mario Edwards out there on the edge earlier to buy some time for Robert Quinn at his age. You want to keep him healthy. You want to keep him fresh. But I do think Robert Quinn will still be out there for a lot of run defense downs. Gibson, I do want to see defend the run better. I think, he dropped about 20 pounds from his college days. I think he's had a hard time taking on blocks in the run game at his new weight. Would love to see him hit the gym and develop that aspect of his game this year. I think he's capable of it. Atauchu is what he is. And we kind of talked about the rest of this group being kind of uninteresting. So there's your edge, defensive line rotation. I should mention Kairos Tonga has a lot of potential against the run. If you can start to see a little bit more from him this year, I think they're going to want to get him out there just to see what he can do, kind of fail him, if you will, so they know they need to move on from him. Now, the linebackers see a massive drop-off in run defense. Both Roquan and Nicholas Moreau are lighter linebackers that are not good against the run. Roquan is a good run-and-chase linebacker. You get him in space, and you get him in situations where he can, really sidestep and dip and get around offensive linemen. He can make an impact in the run game. I wouldn't describe him as a liability, but God, it is definitely not a strength of Roquan's as far as stacking and shedding and being an impact run defender. Ideally, you put a bigger body guy next to him to do some more of that work. That's why Jack Sanborn is so interesting for me, because that's what he did at Wisconsin. Nicholas Moreau is not going to be that guy. I like what Moreau can do in space as well as a cover player, sideline to sideline speed. Defending wide zone offenses, where you got two of those in this division. But again, not a run defender. Matthew Adams could be that guy. If he gets more opportunities that he didn't get in Indianapolis, there could be something there. He's a really physical, tough dude. So I guess keep an eye on him. Joe Thomas, Noah Dawkins, Caleb Johnson, those guys aren't going to be much of a run defending presence. Tavon Young, as we move into the secondary here, I do think you're getting some good DB run support. Tavon Young from the slot used to be a really good run defender, but again, coming back next year, been injured, just has not been that impact. So it's tough to know exactly where he's going to lie. Was probably more of a, replacement level run defender last year, but there's been years where he's been a very good starter there. So we'll see what he can do. These corners are going to be really good, getting off the blocks, protecting the outside part of the run game. Both Jalen Johnson and Kyler Gordon, I think, is going to be a very good run defending duo at corner. Brisker, you just can't rank him too high coming into the year as a rookie, but has a lot of potential to be just a very sound, strong safety. And Eddie Jackson, as far as from the deep safety, is a really good downhill tackler and all that stuff. I don't want him in the box consistently, but for the role he's going to play here, I think he will come down and do a good job defending the run from that free safety spot. So with a lack of talent up front, it is tough, and the linebacking room is really soft as well. So they rank 27th for run defense. They're going to play fast. They're going to play hard for Eberflus. It'll prevent them from probably being the worst run defense in the league, but I don't think they're going to be too far off from that. So their overall defense comes in right where that pass defense ranking was, 25th in the league, which honestly I think is what some might describe as an optimistic projection based on the talent that they have on this roster. But I am optimistic in Matt Eberflus to be a good defensive coach, because he's a damn good defensive coach. So there's some stuff to look for there for this Bears defense. They do rank 16th for special teams. Again, I'm not going to dive into special teams. They were good there last year, and the Colts have been good on special teams. They got a good kicker here in Chicago, or at least he was last year. So they should be pretty sound there. And again, overall ranking 30th in my power rankings. But we are going to wrap up here by talking about this team's schedule, their Vegas over-under, and if I would bet the over or the under here. It is actually a pretty easy schedule for the Chicago Bears. They get to play the NFC East and the AFC East, along with the Texans from the AFC South. So definitely more winnable games than I think a lot of these teams towards the bottoms are going to have. I have them with 12 of their 17 games falling in that middle category of winnable games, and then the rest of them being likely losses with, Green Bay twice, Buffalo, the Cowboys, and the Niners week 1. But the rest of those games are against teams that are all, I would just say far from playoff locks or below. And I think with a scrappy defense, they're going to be in the mix against a lot of these teams. So their over-under is 6.5 wins, I think in large part because this schedule is pretty favorable. And this win projection puts them out at 5.8 wins. So not too far off, but I do think the under there is a pretty solid bet. Actually, right now on my bookie, it's paying plus 106. I have a hard time seeing this Bears team win 7 games. Like, when I genuinely think they might have the worst roster in the NFL, I think that's giving Eberflus and Justin Fields, frankly, too much benefit of the doubt to say they can win 7. Like, I think 6 is probably about the ceiling here. We'll see. Maybe this defense really surprises. Maybe Justin Fields, he does have a little bit of that fear factor. Like, something could click for him, and he's a top 10 quarterback this year, and maybe the Bears even compete in the NFC North. That seems crazy to say that. I certainly don't have that projection, but again, I think under 6.5, sorry Bears fans, is a pretty safe bet. One of my favorite ones that I've seen so far. So there's your win projection. And now we are going to wrap up my interview with my good friends from the Bears Over Beers podcast. And we actually had just a really minor hiccup with the intro. We lost EJ, and then we went over to Zoom. So might be a little bit disconnected at first, but then you're good to go after a couple minutes. And now I am super excited to welcome into our Bears deep dive here the lovely gentleman from the Bears Over Beers podcast. We got EJ and Jeff here with us, and thank you for joining us, you guys. And I wanted to acclimate myself into you guys, your tradition a little bit. The name of your podcast, Bears Over Beers. This might be actually the first time I've opened a can of alcohol on my YouTube channel, so you guys are breaking ground here. So what are you guys drinking tonight?
Oh man, I'm so excited about this one. Once you said, "Hey, can I drink a beer with you guys?" I was like, "Oh, I know what beer I'm bringing on." I was down in Atlanta after I met you at the Senior Bowl. I was over in Atlanta, and I found this beer. It's a bourbon barrel aged drafty kilt. It's from Monday Night Brewing down there in Atlanta. Really cool looking little bow tie there. I'm a big fan of Scotch ales, and and I'm a big fan of bourbon. Put them together, they got to be good, right?
So up here in Minneapolis, I will say we have an excellent craft beer scene. If you guys have not acclimated yourself, I couldn't suggest it enough. But this is Lift Bridge, which is actually up in Duluth, in honor of the big bridge that lets the big shipping boats in and out there, but this is their Farm Girl, which is kind of their flagship brew, and it's more of a golden ale. They say it's a pale ale, but it's not hoppy at all, and I am not a hoppy guy. So this is my summer series, my summer deep dive series, and we're gonna drink a little summer light sipping. It's got a little bit of orange, and it's just kind of a zesty, fresh, summery. More, it tastes more of like a lager type, but they say pale ale on it. So this is one of my favorites. So
It's the best sound
cheers.
effect
Let's.
in all of podcasting.
I guess I you got to hold it up to the mic, huh? Is
Oh
that
yeah.
the trick?
Oh well, sure. When we need the bourbon, but hopefully we don't need as much as we have recently. Bourbon gets brought on when we're depressed and we need something stronger.
All right. Well, it's good to know you guys aren't depressed, and the off season at least has you somewhat spirited. My first question is going to be about Justin Fields, kind of the big ticket question for this season. And my first question is, were you guys either frustrated or concerned or both with, the kind of obvious lack of addressing offense this offseason?
I think Ryan Pace punched a bunch of holes in the wall and left very little spackle to patch him up with. And, Ryan Poles is going to do what he can do. And I think he's a first year general manager and he saw what he had. He decided now's a good time to take a gap year. And he did what he could in resetting the salary cap. Bears are very healthy next year once they're able to access some of that money. And, he really sat on his hands throughout free agency. And I respect that when Jacksonville's burning piles of $100 bills and for Christian Kirk and all that. I'm glad that they didn't do anything like that. That's insane. And so Byron Pringle, could he step up to a bigger role? Yeah, possibly. Is Darnell Mooney better than Dan Orlovsky thinks he is? Yes, right. So there's a good wide receiver that he has a good rapport with already. Are they lacking that elite Jamar Chase number one? Sure. Was that guy available to them at any point in the offseason? No. So it's a longer term rebuild. I'm not totally concerned. You got to give this guy a little bit of time to see if his plan works. I'm fine with what they did. I'm excited to get the football season going to see if it actually can work a little bit. I'd like to see a functional offense, but I'm not like freaking out that they didn't do enough for Justin Fields.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to imagine Zay Jones and Christian Kirk saving the day here for the Bears. I am a big fan of, bringing in this sort of Shanahan style offense. Going to be a lot of play action to hopefully help Justin Fields create a clearer picture for what he's looking at. What are some things you guys saw from Fields on tape that you'd really like to see him improve upon and build upon for next season?
So in terms of the improvement, the thing that was probably tops on the list for Justin Fields was a little bit of mechanical issues with the short to medium throws. The new quarterback coach has been working hard on that. We've seen some little video previews from rookie minicamp and OTAs that look like that motion has been shortened up and quickened up a little bit, which should help in the short to medium passing game. Deep passing, I don't think anybody worries about Justin Fields. That's listed as one of his strengths. But in terms of what we're going to see are things we hope he shows more of in that sort of outside zone, Shanahan, Luke Getsy offense that you're really familiar with as a Packers fan, is more of that mobility on the rollouts, his ability to use his legs as a weapon. If you know how to use that as an offense, it's a real asset to a team, and it didn't get used to its full extent last year. So I think everybody's hoping to see more of that in the right spaces combined with that new throwing motion. Just an overall sort of functional and efficient offense would be a huge step up for Chicago this year.
Yeah, this guy's a big game hunter. I mean, he wants to go downfield. He wants to have that attacking mentality, and that's exciting, and that's what I want to see him build on. Last year, they really didn't do a lot with him. They basically said, "What are you good at? Okay, we're going to avoid doing all of that stuff. We're gonna have you throw quick game and static routes, and we're going to try to put you in an uncomfortable position to see if you can somehow miraculously do that with no reps in the preseason." And so I think everything about the offseason is going to help Justin Fields. He's the guy. He's going to come into camp with all of the reps. Everything is around him. It's all focused on what he does and what he does well. This new coaching staff is not does not suffer from the same egotism that Matt Nagy and his crew suffered from, where we are going to try to make you fit into this broken, outdated system. They're going to try to shape this around what he does well. And that's what I'm excited about. So just the fact that we get a nice hard reset on the coaching staff is going to help him tremendously.
Yeah, I was definitely excited for Justin, because when you go defensive head coach, the first thing you say is like, all right, but offensive play caller is so important in this league. And, if you find the guy, you're going to lose him. That's a whole nother conversation. But man, I do think they found, one of the rising studs, and definitely a system that I think is really going to play into his strengths much better than, like you said, they were doing last year. So definitely a big year for Justin, and excited to see how that all works out. I want to talk a little bit of drafts with you guys. Obviously, EJ, you also do the podcast with Brett, who came on with the Texans deep dive a couple episodes ago. So we've had the Bootleg Football podcast well represented here early in the series. But I wanted to get both of you guys, what was for you the most exciting pick for the Bears, and what was one pick that maybe was either the least exciting or even further than that, a pick you didn't like?
JB, you want to lead off on this one?
I can lead off, since you'll add a lot more color than I can. But
sure.
I think that what I was most excited about, I wasn't expecting it, was Kyler Gordon. And I think that the reason is that there was a huge hole on the team. I mean, I really like Jalen Johnson. We both really like Jalen Johnson, but you need another corner, and who knows what Jalen Johnson's long-term health prospects are with the shoulder that kind of keeps coming up. So it was a really smart pick to look at corner, and to be able to get a guy like Gordon. It just seems to fit exactly what Ryan Poles is trying to do here in terms of athlete, leader, premium position with his first pick and his regime. I was really excited about it. The more I learn about Kyler Gordon, I'm just in love with it. In terms of least excited, I think I'm going to answer that from in the moment. I was least excited about the third pick, which is Velus Jones Jr. I've come around on it, and I didn't pan it completely or off the top. I was just like, what is happening? This wasn't the guy that I thought we were going to get. I thought we were going to go after, a Watson or George Pickens or something like that. But once you start to see the types of players that Ryan Poles was going after, the professionalism that Velus Jones has shown so far, the polish, he's not going to grow as an athlete because he's 25 years old. Like he's pretty much capped out, but hey, that cap looks pretty good. Like he is dang fast. And so I've softened on the disappointment of the moment, and I've actually become pretty excited about what I think he can be for this team in this offense. So I've come around as I've seen the bigger picture, but that would have been in the moment. What are we doing?
Yeah. EJ, before you go, I want to chime in on Velus for just a second. I did think after that run of wide receivers, to me, he actually was the most rational pick for them from a wide receiver perspective. Someone that, everyone wants to call everyone Debo when you talk about these Shanahan offenses. So I hate to be that guy, but just role wise, he really will plug right into a lot of these kind of longer developing crossing routes, deep posts. I think if you talk about a guy that to me was a little bit less productive, I don't think he ran that full route tree at Tennessee. This is going to be a system where he can mostly run straight lines, maybe one little wiggle, hit the corner. From a vertical route perspective, he's going to be able to do stuff in this offense that really should work. And you're going to get some of that Debo jet sweep stuff, the bubble screens. I really like him with the ball in his hands, man. He's really explosive. So just from a system perspective, I thought he fit a lot better than maybe Tolbert or some of these other third round guys that might've been there. So yes, the age is what it is. But like you said, it's not like he needs to grow physically at all. Mm-hmm. And when we were down there at the Senior Bowl, Jeff, I thought he looked really good in person, really explosive. And when they asked a little more of him, I thought he could handle it. So
yeah, when I spoke to him, he was composed and he was professional, and and I just didn't even put it together that the Bears were going to be in on him, because I was focusing just that slice higher in terms of the projected spot where they were going. But again, once it kind of settled down and I took the headphones off, after doing the live stream for 5 hours that night and started reading more about it, I was like, all right, yeah, okay, I can kind of get behind this. So I've really come around on it, and I'm pretty excited about what he's going to look like.
Cool.
Yeah, I think the Velus Jones thing, just to sort of add one more layer to that. It's disappointment based on expectation that had nothing to do with the player.
Right.
It had everything to do with the role. Everybody focused so hard pre-draft in Chicago about X. We need outside number one. That's the gap. And so you draft a guy that is clearly not drafted for that role. Like, they're not expecting him to do that. They don't want him to do that. They're going to play him in the slot and in motion. And he's also going to play special teams, which is a whole nother layer. But when you say, oh, as a number 3, how does he look? Everybody goes, oh, I think he's got a lot of skills for number 3. That's fine. But he's not an X. And so they were just wanting X sort of above all else. And when the first receiver drafted by the Bears was not that, everybody went, what are you doing? And now many of them, like Jeff, if they're thinking and doing a little bit of research and realizing what his true role is, are much more comfortable with the pick. Many still aren't, and I get that, but I think he'll be very productive like you do in that role. So second, Kyler Gordon. I was a huge Kyler Gordon fan. Really liked his game. He was my 5th ranked corner, just outside the top tier. Didn't think that's the direction they would go, but was very, very happy when they did, because he's a great player. I think he's going to have a long career. I think he's going to be very effective quickly. And the Bears had a huge hole there. I just didn't think it was the hole they were going to prioritize. So that was a happy-ish surprise. The other happy surprise for me would be way down the board, and it's the player that JB and I got to review on Windy City, and that's Dominique Robinson, way down the board in round 5. A great athlete, Miami of Ohio, edge rusher. Has quite a bit of bend, good length, good speed, decent long arm move. Not typically the kind of player you're going to get in the 5th round. An immediate need for the Bears? No. One of those 3 position groups that we thought was in okay shape was edge rusher. But next year, what's that going to look like? And again, if you're going to call this a gap year, a development year, to be able to snag a guy in the 5th round like Dominique Robinson was a pleasant surprise. So in terms of, I don't want to say unpleasant, but the sort of pick I think that did the least for me when it occurred. And again, we're talking about a mid 6th round pick, is Doug Kramer, the center out of Illinois. Great athlete, but on tape didn't show me a lot. Wasn't terrible, wasn't a huge negative, but I didn't see anything that made me go, oh man, got to get that guy in the late rounds and develop him. They obviously did, and they know more about him, but that was my first sort of like, oh, I'm really mad about that pick. Like, I don't feel one way or another about it. All the rest of the players they picked, I can see a role. I can see a development pass. I can see what they see and what they're hoping for. When they got to Kramer, I was like, if you want another interior offensive lineman, I think there's some other guys on the board.
Yeah, especially in a class where we saw, I mean, for one, it was like remarkably deep with these like wide zone fit centers. Like just, It felt like every other one I was doing, I was like, oh yeah, this guy's a, center in a wide zone system, which half the league is running right now. And Chicago's one of them. So, we saw what Alec Lindstrom and Arizona State kid was
Donovan West. Yeah.
Both those guys.
I knew you were going to bring him up, and he's that one hurts a little bit because I actually think he has the potential to be one of the best wide zone centers in this entire draft, and he went undrafted. Now, don't know why. We'll find out later. He ends up in San Francisco as a UDFA, which is a perfect fit.
There you go.
But that's the thing about round 6. If he's there, I was like, come on, take a flyer. I know there's a reason by now because I really think he should have gone 2 rounds ago. But yeah, there were just other players on the board that I maybe liked more. This isn't anti Doug Kramer. It's just Doug Kramer was kind of meh when I looked at him on tape. Okay. Not saying he won't develop. If there's one position that might develop better or more than you think, that from a performance, it's interior offensive line. They don't always wow on tape, right? Interior offensive line is a lot about it's about technique, and it's about working with the people next to you. And you can be really good at that and not sort of wow on college tape. So,
yeah. So I just wanted to ask a couple questions about existing players here. One thing that I was having a hard time sorting through as I kind of prepped this deep dive here was the tackle situation. I'm just not as dialed in as you guys might be as far as which side of the line Tevin Jenkins is going to play. And then what are your expectations for, I guess, where Jenkins is going to play? And then For Larry Borum as well, do you think he's a guy they'll see as a starter, or do you think maybe we see like not Tyree Carter, they took kind of two developmental guys?
Braxton Jones.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think they're going to put Tevin on the right, which is EJ and I talked about that all year about how it made a lot more sense for them to start at the right. Ryan Pace and that regime saw him as a left tackle. I think that's how they justified the capital that it took to trade up to get him. And so they talked themselves into him developing into a left tackle. Now, last year, obviously, was a bit of a lost year. He had a back surgery, came back from that, probably came back a little quick.
Jason Peters had other plans.
Yeah, well, Jason, we pulled Jason Peters, off of his riverboat, fishing, and he played some pretty good football for the Bears. To be quite honest with you,
man,
they're good.
Not to cut you off, but as I was watching them back, I was like, "What the hell? He does not look 39 years old. He looks like a prime Jason Peters."
Yeah, I mean, maybe a little bit of rust in the first game, but after that, I thought he looked pretty darn good. And I actually, when I went to a game at Soldier Field earlier, stayed at the team hotel and happened to just walk out with Andy Dalton. And then we were just kind of hanging out to see who we could see, kind of fanboy a little bit. And Peters walked by and it was like, that is a mountain. That is a mountain of a man. So anyway, we'll miss him, but I think that the new regime comes in and you have to trust Ryan Poles if he knows what he's looking at in terms of offensive line. Former offensive lineman did a nice job of bringing in some talent in Kansas City to try to rebuild that offensive line last year. So he looks at Tevin Jenkins and he sees what EJ and I see, which is let's put this guy at right tackle and let's like sit him there and let him be a like really good right tackle. And so a lot of hope for that. Larry Borum, developmental guy. You're going to start him off to compete at left tackle. I don't know. I'd love to see Larry Borum be a swing tackle. I think that would be great. To have him be the day one starter is a little bit nerve wracking, but he's a hard worker and he's come in and he's done everything that the last regime wanted. I'm sure he'll do everything this regime wants. He's sleeps, eats, dreams about football. So it could happen, but I mean, it's a projection, right? And this is a guy that was a later round pick that, had good stretches and had some tougher stretches in his tape last year. So it's a stretch to think he's just going to come in and nail down and be a top half of the league tackle, but let's see what happens.
Yeah, it could
happen
like
Borum.
Borum's interesting, and they are going to play him at left. That's where they've got him right now. It's going to be his first opportunity. It looks like he probably is going to get that incumbent seat where somebody's going to have to unseat him. They believe in him there. You mentioned Braxton Jones, and it's funny because it's a little bit of Tale of Two Cities with Borum and Braxton Jones, because it's going to come down to whoever they pick is going to come down to what they want to do more. What is that identity they want to establish on offense? Because Borum is a better run blocker and has some liabilities in pass blocking. The other confusing thing about Borum is everybody's saying, oh, he's a much better left tackle, which is odd because he has a career total in college and the pros of one start at left tackle. And it was in 2019 at Missouri. So don't know where folks are getting that. I mean, maybe from a physical standpoint, sure, but he's a better run blocker right now. And typically the blindside protector is the better pass blocker, or at least an equal pass blocker. He's not saying he won't be or won't become one in the new system. But Braxton Jones is the other way. Braxton Jones is a huge guy with great movement skills who, if you just watch his pass sets, you think, man, why wasn't this guy drafted in like the top 3 rounds? Like, he's a really good move and set pass protector who is huge. Like, he has a really large frame, great reach. Running, his run blocks are not great. His college offense, they didn't run block a ton, and they didn't necessarily run block in the same way that the Bears are going to want him to run block. So you've got a really good sort of prototypical left tackle pass protector, and what is right now a really good kind of zone. I mean, Missouri ran a ton of zones, so a good zone run blocker. And who do you want to start off with? Do you want to lean more on passing or more on running? And that could go a long way in determining who gets that left tackle seat.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of running, I wanted to ask you guys a little bit about David Montgomery. And do you see him as a guy that you would be, let me reword that. Do you see him having a big enough season that you're comfortable paying him as a running back? entering his final year of his contract here, would be 26 years old on the first year of a new contract after this season.
So he could have a giant year because they could be planning on running the ball a lot. And that could be a signal to not pay him. They could just absolutely ride, a giant number of carries on David Montgomery's back and try to just survive this season and try to get to next season with retooling and improving some of the weapons around Justin Fields. But I'm really curious if he fits what they want to do in the run game. I think that he is really well built to be an inside zone runner, and almost this offense to me, watching Green Bay's offense, they do have a little bit of a guy that's really good at outside zone and a guy that's maybe a little better at inside zone, but they're flipped, right? Like Jones kind of the lead, and he's an outside zone guy. Does it work if Montgomery's your lead, but he's good at maybe the thing that you want to make as your counterpunch and not your bread and butter? So to me, it might be that he just doesn't fit this regime. So it may be a transition year. You may just get what you can out of him and then let him walk in free agency and hope that he signs a big deal, because great, good for you. Like, we like you, but you just might not be a fit. So right now I'm really up in the air about David Montgomery's future. Would love to see him do well. He's a guy that runs the ball hard. It's very easy to cheer for David Montgomery. He's going to get, if he can get an extra millimeter off of a run, he's going to get it because he's going to drive to get that. That's just his mentality. I'm just not sure that he is the type of back that fits exactly what this offense is looking to do.
Yeah, this is JB and I sharing a brain. My question to you, Marcus, as a Packers fan, is would you pay Dylan a big second contract?
Right.
Well, I never would have paid Aaron Jones in the first place. So
that's very true in terms of paying running backs, but I really do think that Montgomery sort of templates much better to the role that the Packers have for Dylan. So if you wouldn't pay Dylan a huge second contract, you're probably not going to want to pay David Montgomery a huge second contract at Chicago, because they're going to lean on Khalil Herbert and Tristan Ebner as his backup as the outside classic Shanahan, one cut and go speed guys. And they're both really built that way. And you're going to see them get those Aaron Jones carries, those primary RB1 carries. And you're going to see Montgomery come in and be an excellent counterpunch. He can run some of that, but again, he's going to pound, he's going to dodge, he's going to run guys over. And again, 26-year-old running back, you said you wouldn't even pay, an all-pro running back, a second contract. If that's the case, you're probably not going to want to pay David Montgomery a second contract at Chicago.
Yeah. I think it's going to be a tough call, because I do think he's going to have a big year, and then, you're going to have to tick off some fans if you let him go. But I think the smart thing would be to, for lack of a better term, run him into the ground and let him go. Yeah. The last player I wanted to ask you guys about was Darnell Mooney, who's got a huge open runway this year. Big Darnell Mooney fan. Really fun watching him back. Do you guys think he can become a number one, or do you think he'll always be kind of that second piece and a number two?
How do you pronounce the Ohio State receiver's name? Njigba?
Jackson Smith and Jigba.
Yeah. Jackson Smith and Jigba. So he will be a really good number two to Jackson Smith and Jigba after the Bears take that Ohio State wide receiver next year. I in all seriousness, I think that you need, three guys at least to make a really competent wide receiving core in the modern NFL. And he has a role to be one of those pieces. Now, is he the alpha number one, guy that you can count on to be this Jamar Chase type of player, Justin Jefferson, the guys that you can just feed and he can win you games? I don't know. Probably not. It's hard to put him in that level of conversation until he shows something like that. Is he a top 30 wide receiver in the league? I think he probably is. I don't think that that's a crazy thing to say, but beyond that, I'm not really comfortable going too much higher. And he's shown a lot for the Bears. He's going to get the most targets for the Bears this year. So in terms of numbers, he's a wide receiver one this year. But I think that he's more accurate to say that he is a part of a future wide receiving core that can actually do some real good as an offensive system once they get that bigger X receiver in that can complement what he does well.
Yeah, I look at this very much like the Seahawks wide receiving core, and the Bears again, and Bears fandom were very focused on that X. They wanted their DK Metcalf. They wanted the big outside, get down the field, dominating physical wide receiver. They didn't get that player. But I look at Mooney very much like Tyler Lockett, and I have great admiration for Tyler Lockett. He is everything you want as a number 2 wide receiver. He's highly productive. He's efficient. He moves the chains. He's physical. He runs well after the catch. Mooney can do all of those things. And I think that surprised a lot of people. Again, smaller receiver coming out of the 5th round, build really as a speed guy. Everybody thought, great, you're going to put him in the slot and run deep routes to pull one safety. Turns out he can do a whole lot more than that. So again, when that receiving core gets fleshed out and when they do get whichever X dominant alpha wide receiver they want to be their Devontae Adams in that, Getsy system, Mooney's going to slot right in as a very good number 2 wide receiver.
Yeah. I got something I think you guys might like, because I was doing the Texans deep dive a couple, weeks or so ago, and now watching Darnell Mooney, I was like, he's Brandon Cooks. Like,
and yeah, you're not the first to have said that. I've had more than one person who appreciates
similar size and
Brandon Cooks.
Yeah, I mean, Mooney's like 6 years short of putting up the amount of straight 1,000-yard seasons that Brandon Cooks has done. But Cooks can be a 1, but in the best case scenario, he's your number 2. And I think that's a very, I think in a year we could be looking back on Darnell Mooney, and that's about the realm that we think about him. So. Definitely someone as an owner of him in multiple dynasty fantasy leagues. I'm very, very happy with what we're going to be getting with the squad this year. But that's all I have for you guys. Thank you so much for taking the time. Jeff and EJ, what do you guys have going on? Anything you want to promote before we say goodbye?
Yeah, so Beers Over Beers in the off season, we kind of let the tanks cool for a while and kind of recharge the batteries there. And we're doing separate projects a little bit. Obviously, EJ's got Bootleg. Let him speak on that. But I'm doing a special podcast series where I've been reaching out and having conversations with different groups of Bears fans. And I'm calling it the Bears Hopium Den. And it's just this big inflection point in Bears history right now. You've got a new general manager. You've got a new head coach. You've got a pretty new quarterback, entering the 2nd year. So it felt like a really nice point in time to sort of check the temperature of the fan base, see where people were at, and try to get a sense of, how do Bears fans feel about this new regime? And that's been a lot of fun. I'm hoping to release the first episode next week, and that'll be going on, releasing that throughout the summer. And then we'll start cranking up Bears Over Beers over the summer here and get ready for the season 4, man. Right? Season 4 of covering this team together and see what happens with the Justin Fields era.
That's craziness. That just doesn't even seem possible. So yeah, we'll roll into the Bears Over Beers content in August. As far as Bootleg goes, we are just on the cusp of diving into our off-season previews, much like yours, covering pretty much every aspect of every team throughout the league. We're going to do it a little bit differently this year. We're actually going to do 1 episode per team. Last year we did 1 episode per division, and in classic Bootleg style, they got a little bit big. We had a couple of 4-hour episodes last summer, and that's not great. We don't want to beat our editors quite that deeply. So we're going to spread it out, which means we're going to have daily content for about 8 weeks solid throughout the summer with a little break for the 4th of July. So we're really looking forward to it. Same amount, same type of content, just chopped up. So it's a little bit easier to consume.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for taking the time for coming on, and thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you guys for the next one. So there you have it. This is going to be a really long video. If you're still with me and you haven't hit that like button yet, please do. And thank you so much for watching. Really hope you enjoyed. Hope this wasn't too long. Do let me know if this is too long, and I'll make efforts to shorten these videos to stay under an hour and a half. But I don't think you guys will mind more content here. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. We'll see you guys for the next deep dive. Peace out.